Oh, I'm so busy saying hi to everybody in the chat. I should probably get us started, but it is so cool seeing all these trend forecasters that we've worked with in the past, people that have been with LPK who are here today to hear what we've got to say, and just so many cool people are in attendance today. So thank you so much for joining LPK's Digital Roundtable today, Redefining 55 Plus Consumers. I'm Valerie Jacobs, and I'm the Chief Growth Officer at LPK, and I'm the founder of our Trends practice and one of your co-hosts today. So if you found yourself here today, you may know me, you may know Liz or Emily or somebody else that works at LPK. You've probably heard of LPK, but if not, and this is your first time, welcome so much. Welcome to our Digital Roundtable. The quick background on LPK is that we're a brand and innovation consultancy that's carefully designed to help businesses thrive through a world of change.
And in our focus on change, we believe change is a gift, not a threat, for the businesses wise enough to harness it for growth. Through strategy, design, and innovation, we help brands and businesses master transformational from-to shifts, moving from who they are today to who they're meant to be tomorrow.
Welcome, everybody. I see so many wonderful folks in the chat. We are eager to get started. Today's Digital Roundtable is all about change, the changing face of the 55 plus consumer, the untapped business opportunity that presents since really the beginning of the branding industry. We've seen this cohort defined and marketed to in a very specific and limiting way. Our industry tends to favor the young, the kind of up and coming folks on the horizon, and stereotypically portrays all others as slowed down and less than brand savvy. But that portrait is all wrong, especially now. The 55 plus cohort is multifaceted. They are a dynamic mix of Gen X and boomers, and bringing an unprecedented level of influence and spending power. They're living longer, livelier, and waiting for brands to pay attention. Examining the shape-shifting consumer is a chance to reflect on how our world has changed in these past years, the big sociocultural shifts that may be coming next, and the huge opportunity that it offers to business. So let's get into it. A little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions as we go, just drop them in the chat. We'll try to hit a few as we go through, but we also have time for Q&A at the end.
Okay, well, I'll kick us off with a couple of introductions. I'll start. And normally when I would introduce myself, I might start telling you about my professional history or my educational credentials, etc. But today I'm going to do it a little differently, because back in February, I turned 55. So now I am in the cohort that we are talking about, the 55 plus. And I hope, like Emily said, I hope that I am still dynamic and multifaceted, and I feel like I'm a good kind of representation of what we're discussing today. So I've had a long enough career by now that I've done trend forecasting work for over 2 decades. I've had 2 major career shifts, 4 different roles at LPK, and I don't have any plans of hanging up the towel soon. I hope to work another 10 years, and I hope to make the back half of my life one of service and purpose. And I came to a lot of these conclusions by reading some of the articles and books that we're going to discuss today about this cohort. So I am professionally excited today to share with you our rigorous research, and I'm personally excited to kick off some myth busting. So I'm going to turn it over to Liz to introduce herself now.
Oh, thanks, Val. And I am so over the moon to be talking about this subject. I'm Liz Grubow. I'm Vice President, Managing Creative Director here at LPK. And I've had the good fortune over a 40+ year career to be in the beauty sector for most of that time, helping create beauty brands across the globe. But I'm particularly excited about today's session because bringing awareness to the issue of ageism is a passion point for me because I've been living in this cohort for quite a while, trying to fight stereotypes and drawing attention to the huge business opportunity that what we'll be discussing is directed towards. So Emily, I'll turn it to you to get to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Liz and Val. My name is Emily Flannery. I am so thrilled to be here with these two women today who've been longtime wise women and mentors to me over my 15-year plus career. And I really thrive in illuminating those consistent inconsistencies in people, consumers, culture through trends and foresight. So the role that I play at LPK is head of trends and foresight. And additionally, I am also a professor at the university level, getting into that rigor of understanding people as unique entities so that we can build a better tomorrow collectively.
Great. All right. Well, let's do a little grounding before we totally get into the meat. And I just want to talk very briefly, Emily as well, about how we view insight and foresight at LPK and how we activate on change. So when we think about trends and insights, we think of it like this. First, we care deeply about brands. We're a brand and innovation consultancy. The brand is the ethos of a company. It's the interface between the business and consumers. This is the foundational strategy that sets the deep truth of the brand. Then we like to think about categories. Today, we're going to talk about emerging categories, brand new categories, new products that enter categories. So this is a place of both stability, where you have anchors, and we like to understand those, but also evolution, where there are twists. So you'll hear us talking a lot about where we see categories going today. Also, we like to think about consumers. This is also multifaceted. There are deep human truths that reside in people. That's where we get the insights from our first-hand research, from our secondary research and studies, but we like to understand people. All of these things coalesce into the broader zeitgeist or culture. So we like to think of things in these 4 buckets and how they all come together, both telling us the insight, which is the deep human truth, and the foresight, which helps us know where these things are going and prepare for the future.
Thanks, Val. You are dead on. And when we compare all of these pieces together, the brand, the category, what consumers are doing, where culture is going, we're focused on what's changing. I have up on screen here kind of the 4 big areas that we think about change and its impact to brand innovation efforts. On the left-hand side, thinking about semiotics. So this is what our physical world looks like. Emerging color, material, finish, shape, style, design, all of those that come through into commercial innovation. So tapping into all of those pieces of research to derive the pattern of change over time. Next, we have in those category shifts, informing our strategy, formulations, product design, retail channels, where we show up. Sociocultural trends, as we get to the right-hand side of these are a little bit more durable. If you think about them like this, they last a little bit longer. Sociocultural trends last about 5 to 7 years, roughly, and they're useful for affecting brand positioning, brand strategy, anticipating unarticulated emerging desires that will influence future consumer behavior. So this is where we can spot where our status quo, our norms, will start to shift over the long term. And lastly, we have demographic trends. Those are useful for anticipating changes in the cultural makeup, consumption patterns, where people live and how people live. All of this to say, our topic of today, the changing face of the 55 plus consumer, is a really unique topic because it touches on the social and cultural shifts of a demographic with category implications and business level opportunities. It's like the Yahtzee of trend content and a massive opportunity that touches across all of these trend spectrums. So ignore these waves of change at your own risk. Understanding them is what will help galvanize business and push all of us collectively forward. And
all of that is to say fluency in trends and foresight is about being better prepared for change, not just predicting it. Together, our work is about creating deeper understanding of the now and cultivating the wisdom for what comes next. Let's get into it. Emily, will you do the honors of framing in the recent past and the now of 55 plus?
Liz, I would love to. So as we mentioned at the top, most businesses are really just looking to who's next, who's next, who's my point of market entry consumer, who's the younger consumer, what are they doing to drive culture forward? Without really updating their lexicon, their internal guidebooks, revisiting their knowledge on other consumer groups. Often folks wrongly assume that once consumers meet a certain demographic milestone, they look like our lovely couple on the screen here, that they're on the way out of the landscape, gazing at the horizon and no longer valuable at driving revenue. This is wrong. Foundationally, from a demographic research level, like census level data, the UN projections that by 2050, in both the US and Australia, just under 24% of the population is expected to be 65 or older. 1 in 4 people on this call is going to be 65 or older. Far higher than today. In Europe and East Asia, that number will near 40% of folks will be 65 or older. On a global level, we will all get older together if we're lucky. By 2030, folks 65 and older are projected to spend just under 15 trillion with a T, up from 8.7 trillion in 2020. That's almost just under double, about 45% more spending over the next 7 years. Despite the size of this group and the scale of their spending, we still see long-held stereotypes persist. 55 plus consumers are often mistakenly pigeonholed as just baby boomers. So a little bit of academic nerding out here. Baby boomers are typically folks born between 1946 and 1964. As of this year, 2023, the youngest members of the boomer cohort are 59 plus, so 59 inching into 60. But time passes. As we look toward the next year, the future 55 plus consumer group will start to swell with the entrance of Gen X. Those who were born between 1965 and 1981, they are bringing new perspectives, life experience that are quite different from boomers. And even today, the oldest members of Gen X are already 58. They're already here. They just didn't trumpet their announcement into this 55 plus category, but they're starting to make some really critical shifts. In looking at these folks, boomers are often thought to be conservative, largely self-centered, workaholics, while Gen X is characterized as almost their polar opposite, apathetic, lazy, disaffected, oil and water coming together into one age group. In the generation myth, if folks have read that in the audience, Bobby Duffy deconstructs the stereotypes that have built up around boomers, Gen X, and other cohort, and really gives the audience a reality check that why is making sweeping generalizations about people on the basis of gender, race, sexuality, or nationality unacceptable, but stereotyping them based upon arbitrarily defined generations like, okay, boomer, totally fine. A little bit of a paradox for us to consider. In light of these persistent stereotypes, Pew Research Center has made the decision to move away from generational cohorting in their research studies and toward life stage-based research. So think young adult, adolescent, middle age, late half of life, etc. Just this summer, July 10th, Pew says going forward, it will only analyze generations when it has enough data to compare different generations in similar stages of life, making sure that they're highlighting generational change rather than differences based on age, which can change over time. They've also said that they're trying to avoid perpetuating stereotypes and will no longer default in their research to using standard generational labels. This is a big deal because the Pew Research Center, unbiased think tank, is known as one of the most authoritative sources on generations. And those age brackets that I cited at the top, I'm not the only one that cites those all the time. It's cited by everyone as when different generations begin and end. And in moving to the impact of some of those stereotypes, there's more than just an impact on the earmarks of when one generation stops. There's overall larger impacts on a negative bias toward aging. This group is stereotyped as mostly being retired, collecting Social Security, pension, retirement savings, generally slowing down in their golden years. However, an estimated 1.5 million retirees have re-entered the workforce over the past 12 months. This is from a combination of diminishing COVID concerns, more flexible work arrangements, and financial insecurity. Joanne Montepar, PhD, director of the Rosemary B. Fuss Center for Research on Aging and Intergenerational Studies at the LaSalle University in Massachusetts, has actually found that negative self-perceptions of aging are associated with a higher prevalence for all of the 8 most expensive health conditions among Americans. Having a bad outlook on your age costs you more money. Let that sink in. Dr. Montepar also found that the cost of ageism in the United States was roughly $63 billion per year. One of every $8 spent are on those 8 healthcare conditions, which include heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, musculoskeletal disorders, as well as injuries. She finds that people who take in more negative age beliefs, often those that are presented us by media and marketing, tend to show worse physical, cognitive, and mental health. But not all is lost. The good news is that those who are exposed or develop more positive age beliefs tend to show benefits in physical, cognitive, and mental health. Additionally, researchers and advocates are turning their attention to the cultures and systems that perpetuate bias toward aging or ageism. Nancy Morrow-Howell, PhD, a professor of social policy and expert in gerontology at the Washington University in St. Louis, says in an article published by the American Psychologists Association that once people start talking about ageism, they start seeing it. And awareness within organizations is critically important. We're on the verge of a social movement to bring about a more age-just society. And Dr. Morrow-Howell is in talks with her university's DE&I office to include age as a diversity issue, shining more light on the way that we present, promote, and talk about aging. Getting us into our last kind of defining factor of the old 55 plus is this group, frankly, has been overlooked and under-considered for years. We're at a crossroads today where boomers and Gen X are combining into the 55 plus age group. They are increasing in size, power, influence, and spending, while the evidence shows that there's not much curiosity in updating our knowledge base or exploring what's happening with this new combined cohort. There's an opportunity here for brand leaders, marketers, product designers, innovators to show a more positive and accurate depiction of aging. It not only makes good business sense, but the societal impact that we stand to gain from it as all of us get older and older each year is unmatched. Liz, will you wrap us up here?
Certainly. Ignore this group at your own risk. We are in a paradigm today with a more economically diverse 55 plus group than years past. Some that are in stabilization mode, some that are rebuilding, and some that are reimagining what the latter half of their lives can be entirely. So let's take a look at what is on the horizon, the future of 55 plus consumers. As we get into this group, let's highlight some key drivers that are changing the face of the new 55 plus group. Firstly, this group has unprecedented spending power. 56 cents of every dollar spent in the United States in 2018 came from someone 50 or older. In 2050, that number is projected to be 61 cents of every dollar. Huge. Secondly, this group is routinely making household decisions for both older and younger family members, influencing both up and down the generational cohort ladder. Whether informing their children's point of view on the world of work or making health decisions for their parents, this group is an under-considered nucleus of influence. Next, we are seeing data that is indicating longer, healthier lives than studies past. According to the newest medical data, today's 5-year-olds in wealthier nations will easily live to see 100. And advanced insurance models are showing that we can expect to see humans living to 122. Lastly, they are investing in a more vibrant and engaged lifestyles. For example, research from AARP has shown that the pandemic has caused over half of folks over 55 to reprioritize how work fits into their lifestyle, not the other way around. These 4 drivers are at the center of the micro shifts we want to spend some time unpacking with you today. So let's get to our first one. Val, take it over.
Yeah, thanks guys for laying all that base level knowledge down. And we like to talk about change in from to shifts. And in this particular shift, it's more about women. And it's the idea that women 55 plus are moving from invisibility to center stage. And I would say one of the places that this has been happening, in my opinion, is that we see a cohort of women who were the first to break the glass ceiling, to take control of their own careers. And now they're getting to this stage in life and they're busting the set of myths that they come up against in that time period. Chiefly among these are thoughts around menopause. Now, I first started thinking about this, and we won't go into my own personal journey here, but I thought about it several years ago when we had a project that was going to introduce some products into the category, but it did not go anywhere at the time. So I've been monitoring this for several years, with lots of anticipation, and things have started to move and groove here in the past, say, 6-8 months. So back in the fall, there was a great conference called the New Pause. This was sort of a gathering of women who wanted to talk about advice, humor, science, and wisdom of life stage menopause. Now, this could have been a conference full of doctors and scientists, experts on aging and female wellness, et cetera, which it was, but it was also headlined quite famously by Naomi Watts, who's sort of kicking the door down with a new category of businesses called menopause entrepreneurs. She has a new company called Stripes, which is sort of her answer to Goop. It's the midlife answer to Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop. She's partnered with a woman who founded a company called Swell, which is the first membership-driven midlife community. And together they put on this conference that had both celebrities and thought leaders, Katie Couric, et cetera, talking about wellness, mind, body, beauty, creativity, soul work, all of it bringing together. And what I loved about this is that they really are blowing the lid off of the fact that women have been often misdiagnosed and misunderstood in this health phase of life. This all kind of gained momentum even more in 2023 in February, where there was an article published in the New York Times magazine called Women Have Been Misled About Menopause. And this was a much circulated article from New York Times and ended up in a daily podcast, et cetera. So this is continuing to grow. I think the other thing that's leading to this more center stage feeling are things like the Martha Stewart Sports Illustrated cover. Martha is 81 and clearly quickly becoming the iconic ideal of aging gracefully, beautifully, and healthily and actively. And so not only is Martha a great kind of icon, she's also taking on things that are like being the spokesperson for a new company called, and a new product called the Silver Tree Reach. Okay, so any of you who are old enough to remember this maybe have seen the commercial where the woman has the medical alert device around her neck and this turned into a meme, I've fallen and I can't get up. Well, this is a sleepy category, kind of a boring product, But Silvertree has a new product called the Reach. Martha is the spokesperson, and it is a beautifully designed wearable device that allows you to customize your network of care. And if something happens to you, it will send out the Bluetooth alert to the people in your network. They're going to go beyond this beautifully designed product because they're working with a great insight, which is that as people age, they want to stay active. Many of them already are, but they do want that added layer of security and safety and knowing that someone can come help them. So their model is really advancing the idea of collaborative care, which I think is very cool as an idea. Also, we're seeing other women of influence show up in branding campaigns. There have been stories on NBC where they're showing these women, and also some very cool Instagram accounts that have to do with the idea that ageism is never in style. Lastly, one of the things that was most exciting to me was recently I was perusing my options on podcasts, and I ran across one from Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Now, I already think she's amazing. By the way, she's 62, and she herself became obsessed with this documentary that she watched on Jane Fonda, who, by the way, is 85, also an icon of aging beautifully. And Julia Louis-Dreyfus is like, wait a minute, there are all these amazing life stages, wisdom, advice from older women, and they're largely not tapped. And she kind of goes on to say, like, older women are a natural resource that we are not using. And she started thinking there should really be a podcast to hear from these women. Next thing you know, she's like, well, maybe I'm the one to do the podcast. And she did. And so Wiser Than Me is a great place to tap into this wisdom and to get to know these consumers. So as Liz already said, 55 plus consumers are living vibrant, rich, dimensional lives. Ignore them at your own peril. They are waiting for brands and businesses to pay attention to them and bring offerings to them. Because, as Emily mentioned, the number of those adults is going to double, and they want to see this in advertising. So that's a lot on women, but now I'm going to turn it over, and Emily's going to tell you a little bit more what's going on broadly, but also more with men.
Thanks, Val. So what we're seeing, and this again is generally, so for folks that are male or male identifying, a lot of their social support has been around being drivers of their career. So think earn and burn out. Once they get to 55, they're left a little bit empty. And we're seeing a larger shift in products, services, experience, and those same networks of connection that focus on supporting people as they move from heavy career focus to focusing on building up that internal wealth through compassion, empathy, and giving. If anybody's read the book From Strength to Strength, it's by Arthur Brooks, and it's a practical roadmap on creating a fulfilling second half of life. It's a little bit autobiographical, but Arthur Brooks brings in tons of research from social science, philosophy, theology, Eastern wisdom, and first-person interviews from everyday men and women to think about how to transform and plan for a future from one of disappointment that after working so hard for so many decades, this is all there is, to an opportunity to progress into a new chapter. Through the book, Brooks shows us that true life success is well within our reach, and really taking that time at 55 as a pivot point to refocus on priorities and habits that really anyone can learn, honing into that deep wisdom. Val talked about that deep wisdom that comes with those decades of lived experience, detaching from external empty rewards, this micro promotion, and focusing more on connection and service to others. All of these in concert set ourselves up for increased happiness in that second act, that second half of life. In the realm of beauty, grooming, and personal care, maybe some folks here are familiar with Hims. So a direct-to-consumer started out in more appearance-focused categories, so hair loss, hair color, hair supplements, but it's already started expanding to mental health, emotional health, and sexual health offerings as well, all under that umbrella of aesthetically beautiful, shelf-worthy, high design focus on a formerly taboo category, men's mental health in the second half of life. In a similar vein, with more of a medical bent as Silvertree Reach, Ripple is currently in trial phase, and it aims to bridge the gap between primary care doctors, caregivers, and adults 55 plus. It's an app, so a smartphone app, providing 24/7 communication between caregivers and mental health professionals. CEO Chris Engskov says that our country's healthcare system is not designed to tackle the complex needs of folks over 55 as they go through mental health challenges and those struggling with memory loss, age-related memory conditions, dementia, and Alzheimer's, and creating that wraparound network of support and compassion to a deeply underserved population that more often than not has just been ignored. I love this quote from author and entrepreneur Shama Pearson, who says that aging brings the freedom and chance to give birth to ourselves, to start anew in that second half of life. And it may be the coolest thing that's ever happened to us, that it is a privilege to get old. In her book, From Darkness to Light, Shama chronicles battling depression throughout her life and finding a way through joy and vitality. She discusses her mental health and medication, chronicles her experiences, and her entrepreneurial efforts to start the first 50-year-old plus modeling agency that she herself founded at age 55. And just as a note here, as one of the people responsible for designing this presentation, the difficulty in finding imagery that matches up to what the research says people are 55 plus are doing, they are living vibrant, vital, joyful lives. There are very few pictures of that out in the world. And I'm hoping that we are at the precipice of all of that changing. And so to wrap up this shift from career to compassion, after decades of that grind, people are starting to chart and map out the life that they get ownership on. In particular, men 55 plus who often have defined themselves by their career, those are the folks most at risk of being deficit, of not having enough friends, being lacking in their spirituality, emotional health, and they run that risk of being empty at that top half of Maslow's. And so when we're positioning products toward the 55 plus consumer, we can't stand on superior function alone. It's the best it works, trust me. Emphasizing the social, emotional benefits alongside their own internal development journeys matches up better with what people are actually doing. And just a little quote, I'm not going to read both of these to you, but just a little reminder that adults over 50 feel 20% younger than their actual age. So if you remember our couple on the park bench, we may see them as a certain age, but they certainly don't feel that same way. Liz, will you take us into the last shift?
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. So we are seeing a massive cultural change from a fear of aging to an embrace and active pursuit of longevity. And again, lexicon is so important here. So from aging to longevity, because if humans are going to be living to 100, 122, longevity and that journey is just so important. So here's a few examples. Let's take a look at Dr. Peta Adia. Dr. Adia is the founder of Early Medical. It's a medical practice that applies the principles of Medicine 3.0 to patients with the goal of lengthening their lifespan and simultaneously improving their health span. He is also the host of The Drive, one of the most popular podcasts covering the topics of health and medicine. He is also the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Outlive, The Science and Art of Longevity. And what he outlines in that book is just as you plan for your financial health, the milestones, what do you hope to achieve in order to live well in your 60s and 70s and 80s and beyond, you need to apply that same discipline to your health. If you want to continue to do sports, running with your dog, lifting your grandchildren, in your 70s, 80s, and 90s, you have to think about your health goals in your 30s and 40s and 50s. So this is a message to the group that you need to start planning now. Life after 55, as we've just heard, is a new chapter for many, one that allows them to reflect and refocus on who they have been and who they want to become next. When interviewing on What Comes After Top Chef, Padma Lakshmi, who's 52, wants to create, I love this, an old broads club as she looks beyond Top Shelf. The longtime host says she's paid her dues and she's turning her attention to new personal projects that she'd like to be involved with, like Hulu's docuseries, Taste the Nation. Similarly, in an interview with Good Morning America, actress and star of Sex and the City and Just Like That, Sarah Jessica Parker, 58 years old, proudly extends the characters' storylines into their 50s and beyond, stating, life is no less rich. And then who has not seen Barbie yet? What, did it just pass the $1 billion mark? No spoilers, I promise. But in an interview with Greta Gerwig about a scene from the Barbie movie, Barbie notices while she's sitting on a bench a type of woman she's never seen before, because there are no old women in Barbie land. This woman is played by the 91-year-old Oscar-winning costume designer Anne Roth, a personal friend of Gerwig's. When Barbie looks at her, she finds her beautiful and tells her so. The woman already knows. Suddenly, Barbie, this fraught aspirational figure, has beheld someone she might aspire to be. And it is a radiantly content nonagenarian reading a newspaper on a Los Angeles bench who knows what she's worth. And let me read this quote from Gerwig. The idea of a loving God who's a mother, a grandmother, who looks at you and says, honey, you're doing okay, is something I feel like I need and I wanted to give to other people. Gerwig continues to say, when it was suggested that this scene, which she calls a transaction of grace, isn't that beautiful, might be cut for time, she remembers thinking, and I quote her again, if I cut that scene, I don't know why I'm making this movie. If I don't have that scene, I don't know what it is or what I've done. What this is pointing to is the shift of how we feel about aging, getting older, toward a focus on longevity. There is an aspiration beyond the frozen youth of Barbie. On a micro scale, ageism and ignorance of life after 55 is no longer acceptable, socially or culturally. Brands must revise, revisit, and rewrite their approach to this group or face being left in the margins.
Hear, hear, Liz. All right, group, as we near our Q&A, let's recap some of the insights and opportunities. The 55 plus cohort looks more diverse than years past. Marketers are still using old stereotypes. Michael dropped in the chat, let's compare Golden Girls to And Just Like That. We're in a different world now. We need to update our visual and verbal lexicons. Consumers are fighting back and doing it for us. We need to be on the receiving end of what they want to see and hear from us. Many folks 55 plus report that these are the best times, the high quality times in their lives, and we need to catch up to them. This group is bringing unprecedented influence and spending power to the tune of 900 billion today, upwards to about 15.7 trillion in the coming decades, and not marketing to them in a way that they want to hear from us is leaving money on the table. This cohort is a dynamic new mix of generations, interests, and lifestyles with no single definition. Could updating, looking at this group with a fresh set of eyes, be your next growth consumer, bringing them back into your brand fold, or adjusting the way that we're going toward them to meet in the middle? In late stage in life, be damned, these consumers are living large and they are the future, driving new products, new categories, and whole new industries.
So now what? All of you in the audience today are more than just curious listeners. You have the power to take advantage of these opportunities and be a positive force for changing the outmoded approaches toward 55 plus consumers. Where to begin, you might be asking. Well, let's break down some of the recap points. The 55 plus cohort looks wildly different. Is your organization aware? Are you aligned? Strategize ways to update and share this thinking with your teams and leadership. And by the way, are your teams age diverse? They bring unprecedented influence and spending power. Consider how you might shift your message to resonate with them, or how this cohort could again inspire new offerings. This cohort is a dynamic new mix. If you're not connecting with this group, can you broaden your target audience definition to expand, reach, and drive growth? These consumers are living large, and they're the future. Trends and landscape scenario planning can help your business strategically focus. Engage your innovation partners to start ideating on different horizons. Val, turn it over to you.
All right. I feel so proud of us because it's about 11:45, and that means we've got about 15 minutes for some Q&A. So let's get some things rolling in the chat. I've been kind of checking it. Mostly I'm seeing some great commentary in here. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, Alta, thoughts on addressing the strategic differences between men and women. I'll just make one little parry here, and then Emily, you can maybe weigh in as well. I think one of the biggest points that we were making at the beginning of this, by bringing forward the thoughts on generations, just generally speaking, I think this is all pointing to us having to do deeper and more nuanced research and not falling back on stereotypes. And I think that that would hold true to me of, you know, understanding who you want to target, men or women, and doing that research. So I think this is just asking of us to go deeper and understand people. So what do you think, Emily?
I think generally as an approach that would hold. One of the notes that we were discussing in some of our earlier conversations this week is we're going to start seeing a lot more single by choice folks over 55 plus. And so thinking about the differences in singlehood or lifestyle choices, male identifying, female identifying, as we go forward, and seeing if there is that Venn diagram overlap, if there's similar motivating factors, desires, life choices, downsizing from a multi-bedroom home to a condo, moving to a different part of the country. I would look for those more demographic cues first, and then bring it back down those trend waves into social and cultural differences of those groups, getting a finer and finer grain on those groups.
And, you know, I have to add that, you know, unfortunately, I think the female side of 55 plus, particularly, you know, as we've addressed, have been invisible. You know, a lot of issues, a lot of unmet needs have just not been embraced. So there is such a big potential in really finding out what those unmet needs are, listening, and then again, huge innovation opportunities.
Yeah, there's some other great questions showing up in the chat. Liba, you're asking kind of a question like, do we know anything about the language for these folks? I think that's a great question. What I was noticing when we were doing this research was less about how this cohort is talking to each other, but I'm always looking for the new words, new phrases, new things like the ideas of collaborative care. That one hit me really hard, the idea of a health span instead of a lifespan. And I think it's worth doing a deeper dive on that sort of communication. But what I love about this work is the reframes that come out of it and how people can use language to shift our own mindset.
I think, Val, to that end, we saw in our research specifically to the growing menopause category that is an area where folks are speaking in very direct and frank language. So I wouldn't universally say that 55 plus consumers are using more coded or indirect language about bodily functions, et cetera. Again, that would be something we would need to vary based upon the lifestyle in the context of the person, who they're speaking to, what they're speaking about, because there is area where we're seeing the consumers themselves breaking that coded language and just getting to the point versus beating around the bush.
Yeah. And if I can add too, I mean, we've also seen like there is a directness and a frankness in this age group, because it becomes this a freedom, what do I have to lose? I'm not, I'm being released from a lot of the cultural norms, or, worried about what if I say something at work and what's that going to do to my career? That's part of the satisfaction, that you are enjoying this time and being able to give back, and also being able to, again, speak truth to power is what I would say.
I'm answering questions directly in the chat. I was just typing back to Ryan about, does country or culture play a part? And I would just say, what I think this particular research was primarily on the North America. But I think Ryan's question is a good one, because different countries are in different phases of aging. And I think he makes a good point here about Asian culture, because as Emily brought up earlier, they're actually have an older population than the United States or Australia. So I think these are kind of like very specific questions that you deep dive in when you come off of this basic knowledge that we put together. Emily, you may have come across something else.
So in doing when we were pulling stats from the UN, other global aging councils, when they were splitting apart, so like the 3-4-5 line click down on East Asian countries and European countries that will have closer to 60% of population aging, pulling apart that what that may cause, this was actually from the New York Times, that what that may cause is more of a cultural strain, where there'll be a larger majority demographic over a certain age that has certain beliefs about how they should be cared for, engaged in the community, and the actual political or social support structure will not be able to withstand the number of people pulling on government benefits, pulling on the need for home-based care. And so there may be a imbalance in some of those cultures, whereas they have a historic perception of respect, reverence, and value, but there's no one there in the community that can actually take care of and continue to promote those values over the long term. So very interesting split between those.
Yeah, I see Wendy put a question here too about how much data is there for people in the cohort who are child-free by choice or not moms or grandmas. So I was just reading something, and I can't quote it chapter and verse statistics, but there are more women entering in this cohort who have never been married before and are childless. And the study I was reading was actually that they're happier. So I don't remember the any of the deep insights, but I remember thinking about it. And then another article we were reading that sort of related to this was about silver splitters. So this is a phenomenon that has been happening maybe for the past decade or so, but is ramping up, which is the gray divorce. And these are people who get into their 50s and their children have gone off to college, and they've sort of decided that I have this lifespan left to live, and I'm going to live it my way with empowerment and passion with whatever path I want to take. So there will be a higher divorce rate on the horizon as well.
Yeah, Courtney is asking, she's interested in how much to be specifically catered to, like Chico's was traditionally very obviously directed to older women. Does the 55 plus community like being targeted in that way? And you know, one response is, you know, again, you have a lot of shaming going on in terms of how you should dress and what's not appropriate from an age standpoint, and that's being broken through, and you have and being able to express yourself in the way that you feel confident and competent and loving without being judged is, I think, what all humans want, you know, and that's I think very important. Emily, Valerie, if you have any thoughts on that.
I can say, Courtney, pulling out that kind of middle section, you know, assuming they're being accurately understood. And so really saying, and I kind of can give you a little inside scoop. I know a little bit more about Chico's than the average bear, but the way that they conduct their consumer research is very much the voice of the consumer determines what they make. The average age of their design team is a little bit lower than you might think, but they are so committed to bringing to life their passionate consumers' designs that they really invest a lot in understanding that primary research. And it comes through directly every season in the colors, the patterns, the silhouettes, the fabrics, all around that overall lifestyle of vibrant, easygoing clothes that allow you to do the things that you want to do, regardless of your age. So tailored specifically toward the voice of that consumer, but certainly not exclusionary or isolating them from others.
Okay, I'm looking through the chat. We have a few minutes left. Lucretia's got some amazing things in the chat today about the ability to pass on our wisdom because we're amazing storytellers. Also, I love the example that Cindy put in about hashtag say your age, or Judy put this in about Cindy Gallup being vocal. Sorry about that. I didn't read that perfectly. Claire, I love this point that you said, enough with cramming the best of ourselves in the first 3 decades of life. So many great comments here. All right. Burning desires, 5 minutes. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap us up today. Thank you all so much for joining us. And if you'd like to start a deeper conversation with me, Liz, or Emily, here are our email addresses. Please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to talk more about this, and don't hesitate ever to ask us more questions. We've barely scratched the surface today, and we feel so strongly that this topic is just so rich with business opportunity, innovation opportunity, and are excited for the power this holds in the future. We'll also send out a recap and a recording of this event in case you'd like to come back to it, forward it to people that your colleagues, your friends, teammates. And as always, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you soon, I hope.
Thank you, everyone. So appreciate your comments and thoughts.